Hello everyone, welcome to our live session today. I will be going over a quick startup presentation to welcome you all and introduce you to our program and various opportunities if you have not previously attended our shadowing sessions. Let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, so Pre-Health Shadowing is a student-led, minority-led, women-led nonprofit dedicated to helping prospective healthcare professionals gain access to educational resources, no matter their demographic status, abilities, or location. My name is Sahasra, and I am the Interim Lead Sessions Volunteer at Pre-Health Shadowing. Thank you all for attending, and let's get started. Oops, sorry. Just a little PSA, we do have closed captioning for all of our sessions to accommodate all students. The setting is available on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and if you need a little assistance enabling the transcript, please direct message one of our team members. We are always looking for ways to be more inclusive and ensure our sessions are accessible to everyone. So please, if you have any recommendations for how we can improve, you can email us at info@prehealthshadowing.com. If you want to stay in the loop, follow us on social media. We are active on Instagram, TikTok, or sign up for our email list on our website to never miss a shadowing session. Since this is an international program, we want to know where you're Zooming from today. Drop it in the chat. I'm calling from Texas. We have some wonderful opportunities for you all as benefits of being part of our program. If you want to play a bigger role in supporting PHS, we would love for you to join our network of student volunteers and team members. You can apply to be part of our administrative team and lead students in various projects and initiatives with professional outreach, grant writing, and more. We understand that as a pre-health student, you may not have the time. So we also offer the opportunity to volunteer asynchronously with tasks that can be done on your own time. We would love for you to be part of our program and contribute to under your own perspective. If you're a high school student and want to get involved, we have a program called HTP, High School Training for PHS, which allows you to connect with college pre-health programs, get involved in fundraising for PHS, and organize resources for other high school students interested in medicine through pre-health shadowing. We want to recognize the hard work of all of our students in our program. So if you are interested in getting published, you can send the essays, reflections, research papers, and reviews to our editor-in-chief through the link dropped in the chat. To have your own work on your website, this will look great on CVs, applications, resumes, etc. So take advantage of this opportunity. If you can, we humbly ask that you donate to our program. As you know, Pre-Health Shadowing is completely student-run, and we are working around the clock to keep this free and accessible to everyone. Unfortunately, Zoom and our website are not free, so any contribution you can would be greatly appreciated. If you're not financially able, we request you send this link to someone you think can, so we can continue to support those who cannot afford similar opportunities. Through this session today, we encourage you to drop any questions you have for the speaker in the chat. Our team members will be making note of these to be asked in the latter half of the session. Take good notes as our professional is going over their presentation, as there will be a chance to take a post-shadowing assessment to verify your virtual shadowing hours. More information will be available on this at the end of the session, so stay tuned. Lastly, if you can, we request you turn on your cameras. This by no means is an obligation, as we are respectful of these different circumstances, but it does help us feel closer together in a time when social distance is mandatory. And that is all. I appreciate you for listening. And now I would like to pass it on to our professional to share your screen whenever you're ready.
See if I can get to visual. All right. You see, all right. So I am video. I'm Vidya Raman from anesthesia. I'm actually a professor of anesthesia at the Ohio State University, and I recently came there in January of 2022. I've been in Columbus those 16 years. So I'm just going to talk a little bit of my journey, and this is more just a general overview and a chance for you to ask more questions, as we go through. This. So I'm just going to talk about my pathway because I was not a traditional, whoops, this went off. So weird. This was not a traditional pathway by any means. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about that and go through. And that may be some of you may be fortunate to go from undergrad straight into medical school. And some of you have to do a little more curvy path, but there's a lot of paths towards medicine if you want to choose it. And the other thing is I ask you to be, especially medicine in the United States is very competitive in North America. So if you do choose to do it in North America, you need to be very open to alternative pathways and consider other options. So I just want to tell you a little bit about my path. I started off, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, which is, a very different kind of place. And so I grew up in a place called Woodinville, which right now is a very hip hop location. When I was growing up, it was very rural. It was like I went through 11 miles of forest before I would hit my school because I was in a special program. And, it was a very interesting, and it's very shocking to me to go back there now because it's so built up and Microsoft is so huge and everything, Amazon, Microsoft, all the tech and everything that was not there when I was growing up. It was a very kind of rural, laid back, kind of different place. And so, the grunge bands were all starting. I'm going to date myself, but grunge bands were all starting, like Nirvana and all those kind of bands. And it was a very interesting place to grow up in. And it's very, very different now. I actually went into a 6-year program. So I got in after high school. So I did a combined application for medical school as well as college at the same time. And I got in, and it was very competitive. However, I think it was less competitive than after college. Those programs are ceasing to exist. And part of the reason that they did exist was in the 1960s, there was a dearth of doctors. And so they really wanted to, what they felt was capture the brightest at an earlier age. And I think as it's evolved, and especially as when I went through about 25 years, 30 years ago, I am really dating myself. And then it kind of lost the attraction of capturing younger because I think it led to a little more burnout, a little more, I think maturity is actually an advantage in medicine. And so it created, I think there were some issues about the program. So there's really not that many of these programs, and some of them have morphed into 8-year programs and morphed in different ways, but they don't exist as when I went to it. I went to Rensselaer, was attached to Albany Med, and I went to Albany Med for medical school. That's in upstate New York, in Albany, New York, which is the state capital of New York. I actually did a diversion between my 3rd and 4th year of medical school, which was very odd. I went to Boston and did some research. And I saw so many pre-meds and people who wanted to go to medical school. And it really gave me a different appreciation for what I had because I was finishing, I just had to finish. And so it was, I just didn't have all the struggles and the issues. So it gave me an appreciation and a knowledge that I did not want to do basic science research. And and I got to live in Boston for a year. So that was really cool in that part of my life. So that was that. And then after I did Albany Med, and I stayed for residency in pediatrics. So I did a full pediatrics residency in Albany Med. And then after 3 years, I actually went to Hopkins for my anesthesia residency. And then I did a fellowship, which is further training in Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. And then I went on to work at Nationwide Children's as a pediatric anesthesiologist for the last almost 16 years. I left in January to come to OSU. It's basically affiliated. So if people don't know, it's kind of a weird relationship. They're affiliated to OSU, but they're not part of OSU. So all their leadership activities and financial activities are kind of separate. However, their academic appointments and everything are through OSU. So it was I felt it was like I had to stay in Columbus for family reasons, so I felt it was a easier transition. I did get an MBA as well in 2019 at Northwestern at Kellogg, which is one of the good business schools. So I do have that as well. And so now currently I'm at OSU. I've been there about 6 months. Sort of a midlife crisis move, but trying to get more into leadership in academics and the medical college, and working on that and building my networks and relationships. So, the typical pathway to medical college, in United States and North America in general, is 4 years of undergrad, MCAT by early spring of junior year. I never took the MCAT, and not a lot of these programs at the time did not require it. Some did, but ours did not. You apply to the AMCS in your fall of your senior year, you get your interviews, you accept it in spring or summer, and then voila, you go to medical school. I'm actually a medical school screener, just a disclosure. And so we are starting our disclosure, we're starting our season now so I get to screen the applicants and make sure that they're high quality applicant to meet our standards to get an interview. So I'm the first sort of barrier to get into medical school to say. And I'll have to say, this is my first year doing that, so it'll be very interesting. It's very interesting how much weightage this medical school screeners do have. I mean, we're given, if you feel someone, even though they're not hitting all the points on the criteria, but there's something about them that makes them a really good candidate, and you advocate for them, they'll get at least an interview and a chance. So that's, I think it's an important rule to, cross that first, find out how they screen the process to go in. So at OSU, I know we get about 7,000 applicants a year, and the class size is about 200. So you can see how that's pretty competitive. That's just the numbers. The things to understand, there's a lot of commitment to medicine. I can tell you, I did 8 years of clinical training, which is not including my educational training. So 8 years post medical school. And, everybody needs the test scores and GPA for college, 3.8 or above, and MCATs. Those are the things that will just get you into the interview phase. If you score high on those things, people just generally, unless you are a felon or something, you will get an interview. It's the ones that don't score those, if you don't score in those percentages, those are the ones that you have to really rely on the other part of their application to tell the much more whole story and be allowed to at least have an interview. It seems unfair, but this is sort of an objective way to get, people to an interview phase. And I want to talk about also a little bit thinking of alternate pathways, because it is a very competitive field, and you need to think how many times do you try, and when is enough, and how badly you want it, and you have to weigh all those things to time is also there. And if you say I know somebody who's been trying multiple times, I've known them a long time, and they started when they were 22, and they're currently, it's been about 8 years, and now they're 30 and they're still trying. So there's a point where you have to say, this is what I tried, and this is not meant to be, and I'm going to do something else and be realistic about it. And then I know people who've tried 3 or 4 times and then they got in on the 4th try. So, I'm not saying give up. I'm just saying you have to have a realistic idea and understand how much resources you have, how much energy you have, how much you're willing to do this, and how much you're willing, because I think every time you don't make it, it's a setback, and you have to get up and carry yourself up forward again. In anything, when you try and you get a rejection or whatever, how many times, you're able to bring yourself to go forward. So that's what I'm saying about that. If you think it's nothing, or you have this, drive and ability to do that, then go for it. That's all I'm saying is be realistic about it. And there's a certain point that you say, okay, I'm two and done, or you say I'm going to be done when I get in. So whatever it takes. There's also alternate pathways. I've talked about traditional pathways in the North American. I'm only talking about US because that's the system I know. There's the fifth pathway, where those are people who are pretty brilliant and come from abroad, and they're able to get straight into, they do just like residency, and they don't have to do, they get a sponsor, and they get into medical school. They don't have to go through all the other rigors of the usual process. They go into, so the ones I know went into like a fellowship. They did not do residency, and then they went, and then they get sponsored, and then they stay, and then they do the testing, and they're now like, they've been here like 10 years or so that I know of, and they've been doing great, and they're like pretty admirable members of the societies and the medical groups. The other alternate ways when you are in US to consider Caribbean, Europe, and Mexico. Caribbean, you're considered a foreign medical student when you're doing those things. So keep that in mind. And it's always harder to get in as a foreign medical student because there's now more American graduates than there are seats, and it's got to become very competitive to match. And so that needs to be considered. And the other thing is to consider DO, Doctor of Osteopathy. There's a DO school, and they're equally equivalent, and that's another pathway to consider, and they're also there. When I was doing it, they were slightly less competitive than medical schools at that time. However, now they're equally competitive. Otherwise, think about alternate careers. There's always, there's pathways through nursing now that you can get pretty, doctor of nursing, and you can get being a nurse practitioner where you're, working in offices, physician assistant. You can become healthcare executives. A lot of the hospitals are run by non-MDs. So think about alternative, especially if you have talent and leadership and organization, if that's something that you want to do. So that's the other options out there. It's not MD or bust. So you think about it. So that's all I have formally presented. I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute, and then I feel the rest of the time is whatever people want to ask or talk about. Any questions?
I have a question. So how did you know you wanted to be an anesthesiologist? Did you just know, or were you just like, you felt like you needed to be in that field?
Yeah, that's a great question. So anesthesiology is one of those secondary fields that aren't very apparent. Like it's sort of it's a little complicated field. There's 3 fields in medicine, at least in North America, that I'll say that you don't, what you do is kind of very basic on what people see, but what you need to know is a lot. And what are those fields? It's anesthesiology, pathology, and radiology. So radiologists, what they do is look at screens and look at films of things. It looks kind of boring. I mean, it's not like a very high tech. I mean, what they actually do is not very high tech. Pathology, same thing. You're slicing up things, and you're looking under microscope, and you're counting, and you're doing all this various things. And anesthesiology, you're putting on, you're turning on this magic fairy dust, and they're asleep. Nobody knows how it works. This happens. You have to keep people alive during surgeries, which seemed like the more exciting part on that side of the drape. People on this side of the drape don't really know. So, but those 3 fields are one of the volumes of information that you have to know are tremendous. And the physiology, the patient's physiology or disease states and things, radiologists actually know a lot about disease states, because they have to, from a little blip on the screen, they have to know what that blip could be, what it could put, what else it could be, what it could not be, and what else can manifest, like physically for the patient, so that they're not just dealing with that blip on the screen. You have to deal with the whole entire holistic patient and what that blip on the screen means. Anesthesia, same thing. It's like you're dealing from 22 weekers now to, you know, however old you are, 100 and plus. You know, the oldest I've dealt so far right now was 97. But you know, you're dealing with a range of people and range of disease states, a range of physiologic diseases, and you know, and you have to get them through whatever surgery. So surgery is a trauma, and anesthesia is another physiologically altering stuff. They may also be having comorbidities or things wrong with them, right? Like they might have a heart problem, they may have breathing problems, they may have a whole host of things. So how does anesthesia react to those problems? How does the surgery react? There's a lot of things going on. And even though what you do does not seem very hard, right? You put an IV in, you're giving some medicine through it, and you turn on this, you know, gas, what, yellow or purple or whatever it is. And so it doesn't seem hard, but you have to understand how everything reacts and how, if something happens in an instant, you react to it. And same thing with pathology, you know, the same sort of stuff. But anyway, so it's very complicated, but it doesn't see, you know, just seeing it from an outside, doesn't seem very exciting sometimes. And so how do you know I did another residency before I did this, right? So I did 3 years of pediatrics. I'm a pediatrician first. So I didn't know. And I wanted to do something that involved adults that kind of, I was bound to critical care. So they're kind of related, critical care and anesthesia. And I wanted to do, I like action. So I like doing procedures. And so I wanted action. I didn't want to be a surgeon per se at that time. I felt like I wanted to talk to patients, be with patients, not necessarily, you know, be a proceduralist or cutting, but I like procedures. So this was the best mix of everything. It gave me an adult world experience, and which has helped me because I now transitioned after 16 years of pediatric anesthesia. I came to adult world and it was not that hard. And so that's why I want to do it, but it's very complicated. It's not like people wake up and say, oh, I want to be an anesthesiologist, because there's nothing really known. And even if you see it in med school or shadow, you're not necessarily seeing something. I feel like people in medical school kind of choose things because they choose people they like, or things they self-select into fields that are like them. So a lot of people who go to anesthesia, like I did, especially pediatric anesthesia, are interested in other things. Like I have a lot of interest in like process development and quality improvement projects, and you know, how things, you know, work as a process from the 360 view, not necessarily, you know, the single patient, what we're doing. So that's a long-winded answer, probably not answering everything quite what you asked, but sort of that's sort of my answer to why I got into it. That's how I knew I got into anesthesia. So have you guys gone into hospitals? Have you seen different things? Like, where are you in the game?
Hi, I'm currently I just recently graduated from college, and I'm like currently taking a gap year, and I'm just heading to like trying to find jobs in the hospital, and I'm specifically looking for positions like medical scribe and medical assistant. But my question that I have is that I'm not really sure how longer this gap year will take, because I fully want to commit myself to like gaining more clinical experience and research experience. And I was wondering how, like, in terms of applying for medical school, how would they feel if, you know, because usually a gap year could take a year or two. But I was wondering how med school would feel if it takes longer than that.
I don't think they look, I mean, we don't, you know, and part of our grid that we look at as a medical school screener and looking at these things, you honestly don't look at how long it takes. It also takes like, we look at what the whole package is, right? Remember I told you, if you have good scores and you have good grades, you will get an interview. You know what I mean? Because you score high on your medical screener thing, but it's all the other stuff. Like if you don't, the gray zone becomes if you are middle grades and your middle scores. Let's just talk objectively. If your middle scores and your middle grades, that's the person who has to have a story. who really has to tell a strong story, like, hey, you know, I did this and this. And you can't do things that or if you do things that other people have done, such as research and things, there has to be a story, really compelling story behind it. You know, like there was, okay, for instance, they shared with us a medical screener story about one of the medical students didn't do well, who ended up interviewing, did not do well one year or did something. And there was a lot of family issues that happened, I think during the COVID and everything. So they took little extra time. The grades had dipped during that period. And, you know, and one of the letters even said that this person is really strong, you know, has a lot of, you know, other things ongoing during this year, was challenging, but they got through it. And, you know, I think they will be, you know, will have success, and you shouldn't judge by 1 year. You know what I mean? Their letters were strong and helped with you know, with the story. And I think they mentioned the story at some point, whatever thing they were going through. They got an interview. You know, it's not like 1 year is not going to put you off, but you have to have a story. You know, you have to have a compelling reason why you went into why you chose medical school. You can't say, oh, I want it, you know, there's nothing else to do or something. You know, you have to have a story, and that story has to be you, and it has to sound authentic, right? It can't be some made up. If you make up a story, it better sound authentic, right? So you know, we're in medicine. When you are in medicine long enough, you become a bullshit reader. Okay, because you have to read the bullshit from people say that, you know, your patients, right? Are they telling the truth? Are they lying about their medical history? You can really smell a rat pretty fast. Okay, I'll tell you that. You cannot, don't think you're a great con artist. Everybody, we go through so many and we see all the medical students. You can smell who really wants to do something and who doesn't. We have, like, for instance, anesthesia is very competitive right now. We have 15 medical students who are rotating through our rotation. And, you know, I tell them, you know, you've got to have a story. Even they have to have a story. They want to get into the most, you know, every rung gets more competitive. Getting to med school is the first rung. Believe it or not, every rung gets harder and harder. And the first rung, so do you want to do that the rest of your life? That's another question you have to ask yourself. I can't answer that. I'll tell you first. And if you don't like taking tests, oh, this is not the field. I'm still taking tests. So, you know, it's a lifelong learner. You're a lifelong tester. It's not like you go to school and you're done. You have this degree. If you want to do that, you have to think about something else, because this is not the field to be in for that. It's lifelong learning. There's always new things. We always have to get, like, you know, continue medical education. You have to do some, you know, like I have to do now. It used to be we had to retest every 7 years for our certification. Thank God that's done. Now we only have to do these question banks, which you're like getting wrong and you're like, oh, shoot. But you have to do like 30 a quarter, which isn't bad. But when you forget doing 30 questions, then, you know, it's kind of stressful. So think about that. It's a gap year in itself. It's not a make or break you, and how long you take it's not a make or break you. It's what you're doing and what your story is with what you're doing. And that has to be compelling, because they're going to say, oh, she took a gap year. And then if you put a gap year and, you know, you just hung out at home, that's not really compelling, right? So, you know, I'm not going to tell you what what is there, but it has to be you know, you have to have a story of what you did, and make sure it's, you know, it's compelling, and make it worthwhile. That's what it is.
Thank you so much. That really helped me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that helps. But, you know, I always tell people, don't do things. Let me tell you, there's look at the competition. There's, like, you know, we have 7,000. We're a public university in the middle of the country in Ohio. You know, UCLA, I was just watching, I have this latest project I have is this latest bad guilt pleasure is watching medical students get in or something. So I don't know why. Maybe because I never had that feeling. But and and there's like 14,000 applications, and you know, these 200 people are chosen. And so some of them are people apply everywhere, you know, in other places, but some of them don't apply to very many places. So the competition is there, and it's, you know, how are you going to be better than these people? It might be a good thing to look and see what these profiles of these medical students look like at the school you want to go to, your dream school. So look at the makeup, look what, I mean, you will learn some things about them, like, you know, what they did and stuff, especially if you watch these YouTube videos, you know, they're all in public. And so I watch these videos, I watch a lot of these, you know, sort of like, oh, they're so happy and they're so like excited, and oh my God, I would never get into med school now. They look at what all they do. Oh my God. So, cause I got at 17, remember? So I'm a little different. I went to med school at 19. So obviously I didn't do too much besides school, you know, there's not, you know, I barely got my license and was legal, you know, and I couldn't legally drink till I was 21, which was third year medical school. So, you know, it was a very different, you know, process. So you have to think about those things, how you fit into those things. We had some interesting people who were older. We had like a ski instructor for a long time. I don't know what his story was, but why he went to medical school, but he was a ski instructor and he came to med school. We had, you know, the typical super athletes, you know, the guys who were swimming in Pan Am games and stuff. We had the concert pianist. We had the, you know, all the this whatever story. We had the dean's daughter. We had like, you know, all sorts of people and gamuts of life. We were in New York, right? We were in a private college. One of the most, at that time, was one of the most expensive private colleges in medical colleges in the United States. And that year, for some reason, we had 40% of our medical school class came from California. And it was very irritating because it really messed up our normal dynamics of the, you know, like upstate New York with New York wonky people, you know. And so these Californians were different. And so they were all like, you know, very aggressive, very blonde, a lot of blonde people. And it was like very, you know, it was very different for us. And it was very, you know, challenging because these are people who really wanted to go to med school and they didn't get in the California system, and they were very competitive, and a lot of them threw off a lot of our curves, you know, like it just threw it off. And so you have to be prepared for whatever you come. And just remember, once you get in this, you know, your hard work is not done. You have to still continue that, you know, and then you have step 1, step 2, step 3, then you have residency, depending on what you want to do. And, you know, you have to compete with now a crop that's even more competitive than the crop you're competing with right now, because, you know, these are people who got into medical school. And so they're obviously, you know, competitive. So just think about that. So get competitive the further up we go, you know. So, and it's not one and done. And say you just want to be, let's say you want to be a doctor and you want to like do something in a small town USA, and that's your hometown and you want to go back and do that. It's fine, but you have to have a compelling reason for that. Like, you know, you could say there's no hospitals within a certain amount of people. There's no care for these people. There's no, you know, there has to be a compelling reason, and it has to be your reason, right? It can't be whatever. So think about those things.
Hey, I have a question. So what advice would you give a person of color or minority with a disadvantaged background trying to get into medical school?
Well, the same story, like, you know, the same kind of the disadvantage. I mean, the disadvantaged background actually plays you, because you don't, like, when did you find out you want to be a doctor, and how did you go through that process? Because that's different than somebody who's, you know, who knows it, right? Knows about all these things and knows about MCAT. You know, you could tell that story. That story is also very, you know, like, I didn't have, you know, like, say, like, for instance, I not that I grew up in a disadvantage, but my parents were immigrants and the system was totally new. And we were very middle class, if not lower middle class. And we had enough, but not too much. And, you know, we didn't go on fancy vacations, and we didn't, you know, we had food, and we had some limited, you know, new clothing. That's about it. And, you know, and nobody was a physician, especially not in this country. And going through that process was very difficult because, you know, they didn't understand, like, you know, the whole, you know, like challenge of, you know, living in this sort of, you know, socially backward world, if, you know, a conservative Indian family, and then being thrown into, you know, United States medical school and medical system at 19. You know, it was very crazy. And that's, you know, that's my story. And I think it's, now I can make it compelling. Back then, maybe not. But I made it compelling enough that I got interviews. And when I went for my interview, I was the only Indian kid without my parents there at the interviews, which was odd, right? It looked odd. And I didn't tell them my dad was cheap, but I told them I had to leave home, you know, and they heard it in my voice that I was speaking the truth. I said I had to leave home to grow. And so I guess they bought it. So there I was, I got in. But you have to tell yours. That's what I'm really stressing to you. You have to tell your story. Whatever makes you, whatever, wherever you learn why you have this passion for medicine, what is driving you. You know, I don't know it. I know what drove me. You know, I wanted to make a difference. I lost my grandfather who was 60, and because of a misdiagnosis. And, you know, that really that changed me. And that compelled me. And also I needed to leave home. I couldn't be with my house. I knew if I stayed there, I wouldn't grow. I wouldn't learn. I mean, I think we're all intelligent. The intelligence has nothing to do with anything. It's your life experiences that, you know, help shape you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You know, I feel like sometimes it's like, you know, when, you know, why do some of these songs become hits, right? Especially, you know, when they're talking about like sad things or whatever. It's because there's authentic feeling, right? There's authentic, something that people relate to. It may not be there, you know, and they relate to it, and it sounds authentic, and it goes. It's the same thing with medicine. It's some authentic feeling that's driving you that people hear. And find it compelling, and feel like you will be putting your value, like some, you know, for us, a medical seat is very valuable, right? You know, we're shortchanged. These are people who are regarded in a certain way or given certain privileges, and it's not one of those democratic things almost. So you're just like, you want to make sure that whoever you give that seat to is a valued person and will do some change and some good and help people, right? Because that's truly what it is. And so, and you have to make sure that you sound like one of those people. I sound a little hokey with that, but I think that's sort of the thing, you know, like, are you going to make a difference? Are you going to you're representing a field of you know, a university? Are you going to be, you know, somebody who will do proud and, you know, like, oh, so and so graduated? Because, you know, we're going to be putting that on our resume forever. I graduated from here, I became this and became that. And so they want you to be somebody who they can value as well, you know.
If that's all, I'll continue to the wrap-up presentation and end the meeting. So does anyone else have any questions? You can drop them in the chat. So thank you so much for that informative presentation. I think we all learned a lot. Considering this, we would like to encourage everyone to reflect on the session today. What brought you to the session today? What are 3 major takeaways you got? And what do you want to learn more about? This writing on reflection is not required. However, we encourage you to submit it to our website for publication for recognition of your hard work and to enhance your future applications. If you want to learn more about pre-health shadowing and get involved in our program, we encourage you to visit our website. We can become an asynchronous volunteer to get certified hours through professional nominations, graphic design, and social media promotion. We are also accepting team member applications if you want to take on a more active role in PHS, to lead projects, initiatives, and to be up here with us. Once again, we are humbly asking that if you're financially able to donate, that you please consider sending a few dollars to us via Venmo or PayPal. It costs a lot of money to keep our program up and running and free to all of you. So if you're someone who can afford to, or if you know someone else who can, please support those who cannot by donating to our organization so everyone can continue to get the education they deserve. Otherwise, we simply ask you to spread word about pre-health shadowing to reach as many students as possible. Now for the part we have all been waiting for, earning a digital certification for the virtual shadowing hours from the session today. So to get the certification, first go to our website and find our professionals course pages. Next, you could take our quick 10-question multiple choice quiz based on the content from the session today. You will have 30 minutes per attempt to earn 70% or higher to get your certificate. We know that sometimes technology can be difficult, and for this reason, we allow 2 attempts to take the assessment. But if you run into any difficulties, please contact us. To ensure that our website does not crash from a high influx of students, we recommend waiting 30 minutes to an hour after the session to take the quiz, which will be open indefinitely. Once you have passed, you can click the Finish Course button at the bottom of the Professionals page and download your certificate, verifying your virtual shadowing hours. If you missed a part of the session or want to go back and view other sessions to earn more certificates with verified virtual shadowing hours, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch our previous recordings. You can also find them via the professionals pages on our website and take the post-shadowing assessments for these as well. Be sure to follow us on our social media and join our email list for latest updates on upcoming sessions and events. Thank you all for joining us today, and please stick around if you have any questions. Myself and other team members will be happy to answer them all. to